of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
He's our hero, and I want you to just I'll let him.
I'll do it.
Here he is.
Thank you. In a lot of ways, that was the sweetest introduction I've ever had. Lorraine, thank you. For those of you who don't know Lorraine Cox, she is a new employee of mine. She works down here in Southern Utah, represents me primarily in Washington County and St. George. And then, where's Cindy? Cindy, raise your hand. Come on out. Cindy also is new. She represents me down here and does a lot of our rural and lands issues, natural resources. So the reason I want to point them out is some of you know someone who's having trouble with Social Security or with immigration, with many of the different issues that we deal with the federal government. Look, my job back in DC can be very frustrating sometimes. One of the fun things is to be able to help people. So whatever it might be, if we can help you, please reach out. Reach out to Lorraine, reach out to Cindy or our district office up in Salt Lake. Let us help you. Let us help your family. We want to do that. Mayor, thank you so much for the prayer. People say to me all the time, hey, I pray for you. I say to them, pray for our country. And you did that, Mayor, and we appreciate that. Lieutenant Colonel, thank you, and yes, hoorah. I love saying the Pledge of Allegiance with a group of people who actually mean it and feel like that it matters to them. Isn't that a beautiful thing? I am so sorry that some of you are standing, and we're going to probably try to keep it short because I'm old and I hate to stand, and some of you are young. The flag guards in the back, friends of mine, I know you're old. You're like me, so you don't want to stand. And again, there are a few chairs up here if someone want to grab them. We did this before, and we had plenty of room, but the building was actually bigger then. That's my understanding. So we will find another place because we want people to be comfortable, and we want to be able to take the time that we think is important. Couple kind of, up here as well. We'll vote on you while you're up here, and you can vote on things. I also understand, again, a couple kind of housekeeping notes. This isn't a campaign event. It's not a Republican event. Some of you I know because I look around the room and I had conversations with you. Some of you, I know you disagree with me. I'm still glad you're here, and I look forward to hearing from you. Again, this isn't a Republican. It's not a political event. This is a congressional town hall, and we'll allow everyone to speak as much as we can, obviously. And again, there will be some things we'll agree with. There'll be some things that we disagree with, and I hope you'll understand when you ask a question or make a comment, I'm going to tell you what I think is true, and you may disagree with me, and I'll say the same thing to you. But one thing we won't do, and I don't think we will here, by the way, we're not going to allow the tone of the meeting to be taken over and to become negative and aggressive. We just won't do that. So if you're angry, come talk to me individually. We want this to be a positive experience. I remember a town hall I did, and a good friend of mine, she was in her mid-80s, she came and talked to me after, and she was just in tears. And she said, I'll never come back to another one of these again. The anger and the emotion was just more than I can take. I'll never do it again. And we're not going to have that kind of event. And I'm sure that we won't. And by the way, I'm in a great mood because this is the first in-person town hall we've been able to do for 2 years since the pandemic. So we're so glad to be back. Oh my gosh, it's so good to see your faces. It's so good to be able to tell a joke and to be able to have people understand I'm joking, and I don't have to say, hey, I was just kidding around, because you can't see the humor on the faces, and right? We don't read people sometimes, which by the way is a tragedy for our young kids, because we have robbed them, and it's going to take us a generation to understand the price our young people have paid in the last 2 years. 2 years when you're 6 years old is a long time. It's a third of their lives. And and our young people as well, not just real young ones, but our youth, our teenagers have paid a terrible price. And we're so glad that we're beyond that. And I'm so glad that we have community leaders in the state who have helped us move beyond that quickly. And shame on other people who will not understand the real price we have paid with our young people and our children in the last couple of years. So let me share just a couple thoughts with you if I could. And then again, most of this is just going to be your thoughts and questions and doing the best I can to answer them for you. I want you to know how much time and how sincerely committed I am to working in rural and southern Utah. As Lorraine said, I was supposed to do an introduction. I forgot about that. Grew up on a farm, Air Force pilot, 14 years. It's kind of cool. I have 3 world speed records, including the fastest nonstop flight around the world. So when I'd be out flying, I'd go, dude, I can't believe they pay me to do this. How cool is that, right? And my wife and I consider those times in the Air Force some of the best times of our lives. When I married her, she thought we were going to law school. I kind of did a bait and switch, honestly. And I stopped at Hill Air Force Base my senior year of college and watched the F-16s take off. And my dad was a pilot. These are his wings I wear on my shoulder here. He was a pilot in World War II. He had 6 sons, 5 of us served in the military. I don't know how many nieces and nephews now are serving. It's deep in our family's DNA. And I watched the F-16s. I go home to my wife and said, hey, instead of going to law school, how about going into the Air Force? She's like, hey, that's a terrible idea. Why would we do that? She'd never been exposed to the military. But she's a huge convert. And it's hard for her to talk about. For everyone in this room, so many of you who come from a military background and your family, my wife can't talk about the young mothers who are left home with 2 and 3 and 4 kids who have to shovel the walk and mow the lawn and fix the lawnmower when it breaks because their husband's been in Afghanistan for the 3rd tour of a year. God bless our soldiers and God bless every one of their families. I was saying earlier in another meeting, we're watching the world change in ways we have never seen in our nation's history, and it's changing faster than many of us can keep up with. Again, as I said earlier, there's things that we've watched happen that I thought, I could maybe imagine that in my lifetime, but I didn't think it'd happen next week. And then I didn't think something else would happen, and then something else would happen, but it's just the day that we live. And whether you're a Republican or Democrat or an independent, universally, people feel that apprehension. They feel that tension. And it's pretty dramatically illustrated with some of the polling. I mean, something like 72% of Americans feel like we're on the wrong track. And I want to emphasize, that's not 72% of Republicans. It's 72% of Americans. Many Democrats feel the same way. Many independents feel the same way. It's not just based in politics. And whether it's, COVID has disrupted our lives in so many ways. And in some ways we dealt with it in a perfectly appropriate way. But in some ways we didn't, and it increased the divisions between us. You have hairdressers who just want to cut hair. You had restaurant owners who just want to serve food. You had kids that just want to go to school. We've got parents who feel like, I went to a school board meeting, and now the Department of Justice tells me that I'm a domestic terrorist because I got angry there. And the FBI says, we're going to look at you. I mean, how could anyone, regardless of your background, feel like that's okay? To turn the awesome power of our Department of Justice or the FBI on citizens who are just frightened for their kids. And saying, I don't think we should teach our kids that they should be suspicious or dislike someone because of their race or their color of their skin, and yet that's what many of them are afraid of, with good reason. I mean, for those of you who are older like me, I remember growing up with Jimmy Carter and the economic times. That was the last time we saw inflation like this. And keep this in mind. If if someone fills your car up for you and picks you up and drives you to work, if you don't, go to the grocery store and shop for yourself, you don't care that much about inflation. But if you're like a lot of us, who, it truly impacts. And by the way, my kids, I think about them all the time. They're just young families starting out, and they're not making a lot of money. And for them, when they got 3 kids or 4 kids, and they actually go through 3 or 4 gallons of milk a week, when the price of milk doubles, price of bacon goes to $9 a pound, it's the hardest working and the lowest income Americans that inflation impacts the most, not the wealthy, which is why so many people in D.C. just simply don't feel the pain of what that is to American people and the fear that it instills in American people. When a meaningful event, which by the way, and I'm sure you're going to ask this question, if you look at what's going on in the Ukraine right now, it is in many ways directly attributable to what happened in Afghanistan in August. And there's no way you could look at what happened in Afghanistan in August, regardless of your political background, and say that was okay. And I was talking with someone earlier, and I'm not going to play this for you. It's a note from my wife. She wants to know what time I'll get home. I'm not going to play it for you, but I could. It's from a friend of mine who was one of our allies in Afghanistan. By an ally, I mean he was an Afghani interpreter. He risked his life, and he risked the life of his family. And he calls me, and he's in tears, and he said, "They just killed my son. They're coming for my other children. Please, sir, isn't there anything you can do?" And how many times did we see that play out? Again and again and again. We had hundreds and hundreds of calls like that. Imagine being so desperate in Afghanistan, so fearful, that you're calling some congressman in Utah because you have nowhere else to go. And by the way, Vladimir Putin watched that. And we know from intelligence and from other sources, but just from common sense, he watched that and he said, now is the time for me to move into Ukraine. And I could go on with a number of things of which we're concerned about, some of which we'll talk about tonight. But I want to close on this one thing. For some of you who know me and you know my writing, and there's several of you who do, some of my books, 7 Miracles, by the way, I'm not trying to sell my books. It's not like I have them in the trunk of my car. But I think you can know a little bit about me by some of the books that I've written. 7 Miracles that saved America. Why they matter and why we should have hope. The miracle of freedom. I am an optimistic person. I believe in our country. I use the phrase American exceptionalism all the time. And I've had people come up to me and say, no, you can't say that. It's offensive. And I know that's nonsense. Of course I can say that. It's a historical fact that America has been extraordinary and has been a light to the world in so many ways for more than 100 years. And I will always use that phrase, American exception. It doesn't mean that we're perfect. And one of the exceptional things about our country is, do you want to take the microphone and, no?
I just want to cheer.
Okay.
It's packed out there.
Yeah, I'm sorry. One of the extraordinary things about our country is we've been able to look at our weaknesses and say, we're going to get better. We've been willing to look at the things we don't do well and say, we're going to do better. And again, we're not saying we're perfect. We're not saying we're better than other people. I just think God intended for this nation to be something different. And it's true. And I still think it's true. And I'll end with this. 2 thoughts. I say this all the time. On my office in D.C. and in my office in Salt Lake, I have both of this. Abraham Lincoln said, we are the last best hope on earth. It was true when he said it. It's still true today. But we will lose it if we don't do some things right now. We will lose it. It can be lost if we don't do some things right now. And this final thing, the Statue of Liberty, we all know it. But interesting thing is most people or many people haven't seen the Statue of Liberty taken from the air, and on the pedestal she stands. Does anyone know what's at her feet? Broken chains. Broken chains. Because she indicates breaking the shackles of the elites, of the monarchs. People coming, and I love the poem that's associated. Keep storied lands, your pompous. Give us your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, yearning to be free. Give us your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, and we will build the greatest nation that has ever been on earth. And they did. They didn't do it with the elites. They didn't do it with Washington, D.C. people. They did it with people like you. The tired, the poor, the huddled masses yearning to be free. God bless our nation. Thank you for caring enough about our nation to come here tonight. Thank you for being here. Okay. There's a lot of people, and I'm so sorry for the people who are in the back again.
I am a COVID survivor twice. And the last time I got it, it was quite severe. And they told me I qualified for the cocktail. But the health department would not allow me to have it. My question is, when do we get our freedom back to buy prescriptions when we need them? That's my first question. My second question.
Okay, I want to understand that question. Are you saying so they would not allow you to buy a prescription that had been prescribed?
No, they would not give me it. I felt like they didn't think I was worthy of it, but there was someone that needed it worse than I.
Yeah.
They made the assumption that even though it said on my test, you qualify for the cocktail, because I'm 78 years old, and it was my second case of COVID, and it was a bad case. The health department said no. Okay, I want my freedom back.
Okay.
My second question is, we have the 2022 elections coming up this year, and I expect that the Republicans throughout the nation are going to take everything. But my worry is, the last time the Republicans took everything, they sat on their fingers. I have watched this last year. The Democrats have been up every day, putting a new bill in, fighting for all these things they want that we can't afford or we don't need. I want to know, what are the Republicans going to do for us in 2000, if they take over the House and the Senate? Are they going to start putting forward and start acting like they're alive and start giving us the things that we need to take this country back?
Leading.
So, turns out there's a lot of people who agree with you and your sentiment in the room, isn't there? Thank you. And I want you to know I'm one of them, and I hope you know that. I am one of them. So there's a couple things to your question, and you can sit down if you want. There's a couple things. The first one is going to be a short answer because it's hard for me to say with the prescription and with the medical practice and what actually happened there. So let me answer it broadly, not specific to your case. Some of the things we've seen in the pandemic make no sense from a public policy position. They make no sense from a medical position. We're lectured all the time, follow the science, and policymakers did not follow the science. We've known for a long time that the paper masks did virtually nothing. We've known for a long time that there's more public harm to our children than there is possible public good by keeping them home from schools. They are the least vulnerable to this. It's for the vast majority, it's nothing but a cold. In fact, most of them are asymptomatic, and yet we cut them out of school for 2 years.
Yep.
And the list goes on and on. Many of the remedies that would otherwise be prescribed to you, suddenly the policymaker said, you can't have them. And it sounds like that's what happened to you. Again, I can't explain that. I wish I could because I wasn't involved with your personal interactions with your doctor. I can just simply tell you that it's wrong. Okay, let me ask about the second thing if I could, or answer that. I had this conversation a couple times already tonight where people came up and they're frustrated and they're saying, look, I'm glad that Republicans are going to take the House. And I know in the room there's some Democrats who aren't glad about that. But for the Republicans, and yet they say the same thing. But what are you going to do with it? Okay, this is one of those where I can either tell you the truth or I can lie to you. Which would you rather that I do? Because, all right, so here's the truth. We will do everything we can do, but are you glad that we had the filibuster in the Senate?
Yes.
Dang right. The filibuster in the Senate is still going to be there after 2022, and we're going to have the same challenge. The thing we can do is stop some of the stuff that I just think is nonsense. We can stop some of these other proposals, and there'll be more. Build Back Better will be back. Some of the things we're seeing with our financial institutions will be pushed again. The list goes on. We will be able to stop much of that. But we still have a 60-vote threshold in the Senate, and we still have a president who would veto many of the bills that we'll send to the president's desk. So that's why I say it's kind of good news, bad news. We'll be able to stop some of the worst stuff, but until we take the presidency in 2024, it's going to be hard for us to move in a positive direction. I'm sorry?
You have to fix 2020.
Yeah.
Because we're in 2024.
Well, that's a fair point. Last thing on that, if I could. The one thing we can do in the Congress by ourselves is we can hold the administration accountable. We're going to go find out from the Intelligence Committee upon which I sit, we're going to find out what happened in Afghanistan. And we're going to hold some of their military leaders accountable. Shame on General Milley. Shame on General Austin. For heaven's sakes, why did they not resign in protest about what happened there? We'll look at the military, we'll look at the administration. We're going to find out what happened with Hunter Biden's laptop and some of the financial ties between China and this family, this president's family. We're going to be able to look at Dr. Fauci. Look, again, sitting on the Intelligence Committee, we were told by the agencies in April of 2020, this was just several months after the pandemic was just starting to spread. We were told definitively by the agencies, we know this virus was not created in a lab. And I said to them, I don't believe you. How could you possibly know that at this time? And you know how I knew that it wasn't true or that they couldn't know? Because one of the very first things China did was go destroy all of the samples. And there's no way they could have made that connection scientifically, genetically at that point. So we need to find out from Dr. Fauci and others, did you fund the gain of function research? Were you honest with Congress when we ask you that question? And there's a long list of things that we hope to be engaged with. Thank you for the question. And I took a long time answering. I'm going to have to go more quickly. Okay, we're going to alternate rooms and or sides. Gentleman in the back of the hat. A former military officer.
Yes. I was pleased to serve for many years as a naval officer. My question to you is...
Can everyone hear, or should I give him this? Okay, I'm going to be Donahue here and run up and down, right?
President took an oath to uphold the laws of this country. We have immigration laws. He's totally ignoring them. The millions of immigrants that are coming into this country are damaging this country immensely. Why isn't he held accountable? Why shouldn't he be impeached? He's not doing his job.
How many times was President Trump impeached? Over a phone call, which you have to stretch imagination to find anything wrong with phone call, let alone something impeachable. And then after the election, you make such a great point about the president's responsibility. And George, you were going to ask this question, and I think you had another one too. But the president's responsibility is to uphold and sustain the laws of the land. The laws of the land, they've never changed this. The Democrats in Congress have never changed the laws of the land. They haven't passed any immigration reform. They didn't say, no, the southern border doesn't exist any longer. No, Customs and Border Patrol doesn't have to capture and deport people. And let me tell you one experience I had that I think illustrates this. So I was at the border some time ago. We're out there with the Customs and Border Patrol agents. This was before this catastrophe over the last year. 2 million people that we know of who have entered the country illegally. And it's substantially more than that, because those are the only ones we know of. 2 million people, which is more than the entire population of Montana, more than the population of Idaho and Wyoming. It's half the population or more than the state of Utah. I mean, this is a huge number of people. Again, back to my experience. We're at the end of the wall. A large community, a large, not city, but a good-sized community, 30 or 40,000 people on the other side. A dusty road that leads up to the wall, the border, and pickups and vans show up. And the people they brought there by coyotes. And by the way, if you care about women's rights, if you care about children and sexual exploitation, if you care about any humanitarian efforts, you cannot support what is going on at the border. If you care about those things at all, you cannot support what's going on at the border. And let me illustrate that. If you show up at the border without a certain colored wristband, you will be killed. Do you know why? Because that means you're there without the help of a coyote. And they control all of that trade. And they will kill you if you go to the border now without an identifying bracelet. Because they are moving millions of people to the border. And they're getting paid for it. So we're watching and a van stops, and about 12 people get out, a few men, 3 or 4 women, and children. and they just put their heads down. They've been told what to do. They just start walking up this path to the border, and the Border Patrol agents, they cannot touch them. The federal courts have said you cannot touch someone, you can't physically stop them from crossing the border. So they take one step across the border, they kneel down, and they hold up a piece of paper that says, I am, and they state their name, I am claiming asylum, and they check a box. There's 3 or 4 choices, maybe 6 choices of why they're claiming asylum. And from that moment on, under this president, they are allowed to stay in the country while they claim asylum. Their court dates are 5 to 7 years in the future. And how many of them do you think will show up? We know the answer. It's something less than 2%. And so President Biden recognized this. This is a problem for him. And he instituted a policy which is very simple. If you come and claim asylum, fine, we'll give you an asylum hearing, but you're going to go back to Mexico or your country of origin while you wait for your hearing. That is the difference between 2 million people crossing the border and a few 100,000 that happened under President Trump.
You met President Trump.
Oh my gosh. All right, my career's over. I'm just going to... Okay, so just for clarity, does everyone know which president I meant? Okay, that's the difference under the previous administration and this administration. And he has a duty to uphold and to sustain the law, which is why, by the way, the federal courts have said, no, you have to comply with this policy. So, do you know what this president said? Okay, fine, courts, we will. So of the 2 million plus who have crossed the border illegally, and most of them claiming amnesty, do you know how many to date he has deported and sent back to their country of origin? 127. So he can claim I'm upholding the law, but he clearly is not. And you know, at the end of the day, this is going to be up to Kevin McCarthy and other leadership, but there clearly has to be an investigation into that. And whether it rises to the level of impeachment, we'll find out. But you cannot ignore that responsibility.
How long does that take?
How long will it take to do the investigation? Well, understand this. As long as we're in the minority, we can't do it. As long as Republicans are in the minority, do you think Nancy Pelosi's going to call an investigation into that? Or do you think Adam Schiff will on the Intel Committee? Or Schumer?
What about the FBI,
Okay.
CIA? They were so corrupt.
Yeah.
They couldn't have investigated Hillary's email.
Okay, so I don't know who to go to. I said I'd give you a question because you're here with your sons in uniform. And they're here for a citizens in the community badge. All right, and I think he's going to share some of the things. Yeah.
I actually, well, my original question was taken, but I work in finance.
No, wait. So there wasn't just one guy who wanted to talk about the border? Is that what you're saying? Who saw that coming? Yeah.
My clients, I'll call them constituents, look to me to give them guidance, and all we're experiencing right now is volatility, rough markets, and runaway inflation. And it seems to be that the course we're taking in the Ukraine, as the president told us, is going to do no more than create more inflation, as we're more worried about border integrity in the Ukraine than we are domestically. So, and we're worried more about totalitarianism in Russia than we are domestically and in our northern border. So, runaway inflation, they're talking about shutting down a pipeline and creating less energy flow and high energy that translates to everything that we buy and we do. So the American people have been saddled with an additional tax. And it seems like the current administration has no plan to deal with this.
Well, that's not true. They do have a plan. Their plan is to spend more money.
Or to create a shiny object to distract us, which is conflict with you.
Yeah, I've heard some people say that. If we could, respectfully, I'm going to agree to disagree on that one issue. I think it does distract. I don't think it's manufactured. And there's several layers to what you asked, so if I could address them if I could. Does anyone want to talk about Ukraine for a little bit? Yeah. Okay. To your point about inflation, let me answer that first if I could, and the impact of this. If you want to strengthen Vladimir Putin, do everything you can to increase the price of energy, the price of oil. It's his only form of foreign currency. It's by far the largest export. We are literally financing the invasion in Ukraine with petrodollars. And Vladimir Putin loves the fact that oil is $80 approaching 100, and some analysts expect 140 to 150. That's a windfall for him. If you want to strengthen Vladimir Putin, increase the price of oil. The very first day this president came to office, he signed an executive order that shut down the Keystone Pipeline. More than that, though, he began to demonize the entire oil and gas industry. He convinced financial institutions not to work with them. Don't loan them money. Don't work with them, which is as meaningful as anything else he did. He shut down any of the permitting for exploration in the West, on any federal lands, and also in Anwar, up in northern Alaska. Who is a great fan of President Biden's energy policy? Vladimir Putin. If you want to hurt Vladimir Putin, drive the cost of energy down, as we did in the previous administration. We were a net exporter of oil last year. It was a miracle what we did over the course of 7 or 8 years. No one thought it could be done, and we did it. It was an economic miracle, and we threw it all away. We literally threw it all away. And 6 months into his presidency, President Biden had to go to OPEC and said, will you please increase production? Because I'm not going to. And by the way, if you want to develop the energy environmentally conscious, if you want to do it environmentally best practices, it's not done in OPEC. It's done here in the United States. So the environmental impacts of that policy were also acute. Okay, so I think was that your question on energy and inflation? Did we address that?
Yes.
Okay, you kind of cheated, but not really, because you asked about Ukraine. But I'm going to answer that if we could, because I know that other people want to do this. We'll want to talk about it. And I'm going to try and do it briefly. But it's clearly on everyone's mind, or at least on many people's minds, because it's what we're seeing unfold before us. A couple things to set it up. Vladimir Putin has made it clear that he considers the greatest catastrophe of the previous century was the fall of the Soviet Union. He has said it again and again and again. Not World War II, which killed 75 to 80 million people, not the Holocaust, not anything else you could imagine in 100 years, the fall of the former Soviet Union. Now, he said, we will rebuild that. Now, do I think he's going to go into Poland or the Baltics? No, not right now. Almost certainly not. But his risk appetite in Ukraine is enormous. And his interest in Ukraine is unparalleled. And it's very clear that he will demand that Ukraine never be part of NATO. And by the way, we were never going to invite Ukraine into NATO. I shouldn't say never, but it wasn't going to happen for generations. They are the second most corrupt country in the world, followed only by which nation are they? That's Russia. And they never met any of the thresholds that would allow them to be admitted to NATO. So President Putin, who is a KGB thug, but a brilliant KGB thug, he uses that obviously as a pretext. So we were watching some really, really sensitive, but really acute intelligence that was never available to us before. And starting in about October, we realized he's going to go take Ukraine. And then every military practice that he instituted after that reinforced that idea. And this was very, very different than anything we'd ever seen. He did the same thing in April, but this was incomparable to that. I mean, they brought soldiers as far away as the North Korean border. One thing that has been publicly reported as one of the measures is how much blood are they stockpiling in anticipation of combat. I mean, those are the kind of things we look at and we say, are they serious about this invasion? And it's very clear that they were. I think you're going to watch an invasion unfold in slow motion. He may send soldiers into Kiev. Yes, sir. You want to say something quickly?
Yeah, very quickly. Actually, a couple of things. It's easy to blame Russia what they're doing, but consider this: when COVID was happening and the country shut down, oil dropped dramatically. We, as a populace here, what we can do is cut back on our driving, stop building huge houses, allowing the immigrants to have to work for nothing on the houses. Okay, we're part of the problem anyhow, because we're living way above where we should.
Yeah, I think that's a fair observation, and there's things we can do that would affect the price of energy. And there's some environmental benefits from doing that as well, which I would imagine is something that's important to you. But they're really kind of apples and oranges here right now. I mean, and one other thing to keep in mind as well is the price of energy, once again, like inflation, it affects the poorest among us disproportionately. A lot of times, I mean, people look at electric cars. I mean, I'll use my kids as an example. They can't afford an electric car. And a lot of times, I mean, when my wife and I were starting out, we drove a 1967, I can't even remember what the thing was, Oldsmobile something that got about 6 miles to the gallon. Well, we did that because that's all we could afford while we're in college. So, I mean, it's kind of a double whammy for them. Okay, fair point. If I could, let me conclude with Ukraine. Last thing on that, it's going to impact us. The president has already tried to prepare us, obviously, with the price of energy. It's more than that, but I want to be really clear on this. Former Air Force pilot, I've seen the impacts of this, as many of you have. Those in the military understand the cost and the price that people pay. I would never support sending U.S. soldiers into Ukraine to fight Russia. It's a catastrophe if we get to that point, and I'll get your questions in a second. And we won't. I really don't believe we will. Last thing, there is one way we could dissuade, or we could have, it's probably too late now. The one thing that Vladimir Putin is truly fearful of, the one thing he's terrified of, they'll take casualties, they'll take military casualties in the invasion, in the war, but he can't sustain casualties week after week after week after week by a bloody occupation. And if our president, our leadership, had made it clear 2 months ago, we will support and arm a resistance. Because the Ukrainian people don't want to be part of Russia. He says they do, and some people in the East, very, very few, some people in the East regions do.
How are you going to do that when he couldn't even do Afghanistan? He didn't support those people.
Well, I'm not...
No, get specific. I want specifics out of you.
About what?
You're doing all these generalities. What are you doing?
Well, what do you want me to be specific about?
What's the Congress doing about it?
About which?
Afghanistan, about Ukraine, about the economic policy. We're 30 trillion in the hole.
Yeah.
That's unsustainable.
Okay, well,
we have an open border. That's unsustainable. And you're sitting there telling me about the general picture. What are you doing about it?
Well, look, let me come back to each one of these said. Do you really think there's anything I could do about Afghanistan at this point?
You say you're not going to go in with troops?
Well, of course not. Into Afghanistan?
Well, you should have taken all those supplies in
Afghanistan
Ukraine.
Look, you got to understand too. There's an executive, and the president is responsible for those things. There's nothing I can do in Congress about Afghanistan. That was a president who botched that. It was the president's policies who caused that destruction, that debacle in Afghanistan.
Okay, so why aren't you more vocal?
Okay, that's a fair thing, because I've heard people say that. Do you know how many times I've talked on the media about Afghanistan? At least 200. I have been on TV at least 3 to 4 times a week talking about Afghanistan and the border and every one of these things. So let me tell you this. If you think I'm the problem, you're simply wrong. And if you think I have not talked about this, you're simply wrong. If you don't think I'm upset about the border or about $30 trillion or about Afghanistan or about Ukraine, you're simply wrong. But I am a member Okay, I'm going to finish this thought. There's one thing we could do, and that's if he would arm a resistance. I wish he would. I pray he would have. And I wish that he would still. Because it's the one thing that Vladimir Putin's afraid of. Okay, we're going to go to another question. We're coming to this side. I got to ask anyone. Yes, sir. Okay, we're going to go here because I have to go men and women, men and women. Yes?
I want to know when we're going to audit the 2020 election in the state of Utah.
Okay, when are we going to audit the 2020 election in the state of Utah? To repeat the question. Okay. When are we going to audit the 2020 election in the state of Utah? They actually are. And by the way, it's not up to me, and it should never be up to me, because Nancy Pelosi tried to federalize the election, and it's a catastrophe if she does. It's a state issue. The state constitutions each individually mandate that our federal constitution mandates that every state has responsibility for how they conduct their elections, and it's up to the local officials. And by the way, they have. And I want everyone to know here that anyone could look at the 2020 election and there's just something that feels wrong about it, right?
Yeah.
And there's
It's not just the president that was elected. There's other people in Utah that were elected that was rigged.
well, and I'm not sure I agree with that because I haven't seen evidence that would support that.
We've heard that.
We haven't audited it. How do you get the evidence?
Well, the audits is from the legislature and from the governor. But look, and sometimes, again, I'm going to have to say I disagree with you and try to do so respectfully. After 2020, I was so deeply concerned about the elections, I have spent so much time with our election officials, county auditors primarily, to say, show me the process. How do you know that these mail-in ballots are good? How do you verify that this is actually the person who you say it is? How about your machines? Are they able to be hacked? And I've left those many conversations with a high degree of confidence in Utah elections. I have 0 degree of confidence in Philadelphia, in Atlanta, in Madison, Wisconsin, in some of these really key battleground states, in Clark County, in some of these other states. I wish they would follow the Utah model.
It's all 50 states are involved.
Yeah. All right. Let me come. Yes, sir.
Even if we take the Congress back come November, we've got years to undo. There's so much that he's done wrong and so much of a mess that we've been left in. How do you propose we're going to get rid of that?
Okay. That's a great question, and I'm so glad you brought it up. Look, if we look at these problems, I'm going to illustrate some of them in a minute. If we looked at these problems and said, holy cow, I don't know how to fix it, that sucks. And that's a bad, bad place to be. The good news is we know how to fix it. If you're concerned about 2 million people crossing the border, we know how to fix it because we did fix it. It's the Remain in Mexico policy, and it's the other things that the previous administration implemented which did fix it. If you're concerned about $30 trillion in debt, and sir, you mentioned $30 trillion in debt, that is the reason I ran for Congress. Back in the quaint days, 9 years ago, when we were $18 trillion in debt, and we're now 30. And I want to illustrate this. This takes a minute, but I think it's such a great illustration and helps us understand. We have spent, in the last 18 months, we have spent approaching $10 trillion. And you say, Chris, that can't be true. How could it possibly be that much? The federal government, under President Biden's budget, 6.3. Previous to that, it was about 4.7. We spent 2.1 in the first pandemic package. We spent 2.2 in the second. We spent 1.2 in the transportation bill. And you add it all up, and it's over $10 trillion. Okay, $1 trillion, a lot of people go, $1 trillion, that's a lot of money, right? Sounds like it's a lot of money. Okay, let me illustrate it. 1 million seconds is 11 days. 1 billion seconds is 31 years. 1 trillion seconds is 31,000 years. Now think of it this way. Imagine I stretched a string from that wall to this wall. This is 0. This is 31,000. And if I said, go touch 1 million, where would you touch? You touch the wall. It's 11 days. 11 days to 31,000 years? But what if I said, go touch 1 billion? Where are you touching? Dang near the wall. I mean, it's smaller than the length of your finger. 31 years to 31,000 years. So when we go from billions to trillions, it's not double. It's an unimaginable amount of money. We've spent nearly 10 trillion. Okay, now to your question, how are we going to fix it? I ran for Congress because of our debt and our spending. Republicans compelled the administration to spending primarily through sequester. 14, 15, and 16, for the first time since the Korean War, we actually cut government spending for 3 years in a row. And when I say cut government spending, I don't mean we cut the rate of increase, which is just a dishonest way of that's what they said before. Well, we were going to grow at 2%. Now we're only going to grow at 1.9%. Therefore, we cut government spending. This was not that. We actually cut the amount of money the government spent 3 years in a row, first time since the Korean War. We cut the deficit down to about $400 billion. Still a lot, but probably sustainable at that rate. we know how to fix them. Every one of these problems we know how to fix. I ask you to give me any issue, and I think I could give you a solution to it. We just have to have political leadership that will do it. And we're going to, I hope, take a step in that direction in 2022. And by the way, there are people in Congress who truly believe it does not matter how much money a government prints and a government spends. Modern monetary theory, they have PhDs from Harvard and other places telling it does not matter. And a 7th grader can tell you that's insane. Of course it matters. But we can fix these. Okay, we're going to go last 2 questions if we could.
Chris, I've got a question, 2 questions for you.
Okay.
One I introduced was the CIA and the FBI.
Okay.
And the corruption that's inherent within those organizations. And we saw it with the 2020 election and the Hillary Gate scenario.
Yeah.
We also saw it with the Hunter
Yeah.
Biden's laptop and all of the interference that China had. The second one is, I think that one of the only ways that we're going to get a solution here is with term limits. Would you support term limits?
I've always supported term limits. I happily support term limits. The last thing in the world I want to do is spend 30 years in Washington, D.C. And I think...
When you say term limits, what is your idea?
Probably 12 and 12. I mean, 12 years I'm talking.
12 years.
Yeah, 12 years. Two terms for senator, 6 for the House. Maybe someone could convince me 18 for the Senate. I don't care about the Senate. They don't do anything anyway. Yeah.
Get rid of Lindsey Graham.
Okay, so I would happily do that, and believe me, my wife would shoot me if I didn't, because she would say, there's no way in the world you're staying back there in D.C. any longer than that anyway. To your point, though, and it deserves an hour question, but I'm going to synopsize it to a couple sentences. It's stunning to me that the Department of Justice and the FBI could be turned into a political arm of one of our political parties and target a sitting president to destroy him, and they did. And there's no question about it. And I know that intensely because I sat on the House Intelligence Committee that did that investigation for 4 years. And it was shocking, the things we learned as we went along. And I'm praying for a couple people. Senator Manchin, Senator Sinema, and the special counsel, special investigator, Mr. Durham, that he continues to move forward. Because the American people deserve to know what happened there. And some people deserve to be held accountable. Okay, we got some anxious...
Congratulate you on everything that you do in your stance and position. My big question is our currency and our economics and everything that's happening right now with Ukraine and Putin and China and Iran points to me a devaluation of the currency and eventually a change in currency, and it's going to demise this country, and anybody that has a dollar, it will be worthless. And this is on the precipice right now. Address that. What can we do to save the economy? I mean, not just this president, but you can go back president after president that has pulled down this economy in this country.
Including Republican presidents.
Well, Trump, I helped President Trump.
Yeah. I had this conversation with the previous administration, the president, and I said, Mr. President, there's 2 things, the great existential threats to our future, China and our debt. And he was willing to admit, I haven't been very good on our debt. And he explained, he said, look, I'm a New York businessman. I've created billions of dollars of wealth by leveraged capital, by borrowing money. And he said, give me the second term and we'll come try and address that. I was very hopeful that he would. But some of our, George Bush wasn't very good at it either. Frankly, some of our previous Republican Congresses haven't been good at it. As I said to you, some of them have. And some of us are committed to doing it. Last thing I'll say on that is, look, I agree with everything that you said. And if you devalue the dollar through inflation, which is one way that they hope to pay off the debt, essentially, by inflating our dollars. But the other is, the world changes in a moment if we lose the dollar as the world currency. And there's one country who is committed to doing that, and who is that? China, obviously. You know the first country that agreed to begin exchanging not in the US dollar? Germany. Germany. They last summer, for the first time, signed agreements and said they'd play with the Chinese yuan. So, I mean, we have to. But, you know, the dollar is only as good as the value of the trust in the dollar. And when other countries look at them and say, look at their debt and their spending, then they lose that trust. And as I started in my presentation tonight, our children, our grandchildren, we have to give them the same world or something as close as we can to the same world that we grew up in. The same opportunities, the same American dream. There's a young man in the back that's been raising our hand, and I know you want to talk, so.
My first question is on the border with fentanyl coming across and stuff. How come anybody hasn't introduced a bill to declare the cartels a terrorist organization to stop the fentanyl coming across the border and killing our children?
Yeah, that's a great question. I love the idea. There actually have been a number of bills. I'm co-sponsor on several of them. The problem is, when the Republicans present a bill, Ms. Pelosi does not have to bring it to the floor. So there are probably 5 or 6 bills that address that in various ways. Republican bills, of which I said I've co-sponsored some of them. But Ms. Pelosi will never allow us to vote on it.
But you've had all 4 years. Why wasn't stuff done then?
Well, we did do a lot of stuff. I mean, really, you've got to give some credit to the things that we did do 3 or 4 years ago. Look, I'm not here to say, holy cow, we were wonderful. But if you're talking about the border, we did fix the border. It was by and large fixed. If you're talking about rebuilding our military, we did some of that. If you talk about tax reform that gave every American a tax break, we did that. Regulatory reform. I mean, there were a number of things that the previous Congress did do in the 2 years that we had the House and the Senate and the presidency. Did we do enough? No. Do people in this room feel like we didn't do enough? For sure. I share that feeling. But I do think that it's to be fair that you got to say, well, we did do some of the things. I think tax reform is one of the most meaningful things we've done. We gave every American a tax break. And we had an economy because of that. It was the strongest economy in my lifetime. The lowest unemployment rate ever for African Americans and minority communities. The lowest unemployment rate ever for women. I mean, there were some really, I mean, remember where we were 4 years ago or 2 years ago. The lowest price of gas, our energy policy. There were some really positive things that took place.
Who funds the cartel?
Who what?
Who funds the cartel? We do.
Yeah. Okay, did you have something else? You're kind of cheating because we're giving you 2.
Why do the U.S. taxpayers have to put billions of dollars to our enemies instead of using some of that money to deal with our own social diseases like homelessness and mental health?
Okay, so when you say funding our enemies, who do you mean?
The countries that hate us that we keep giving foreign aid to.
Well, like who? Who do you mean?
Like to some of these Middle Eastern countries where money's making their way in there, like buying oil from Iran or wherever else.
Yeah.
Instead of getting oil from here.
Well, again, we don't buy oil from Iran, and we haven't for as long as I've been alive, probably, or shortly after that.
I heard the other day that they're looking to buy oil from Iran now.
No. Iran's heavily sanctioned. There's no way in the world we're going to buy oil from Iran. What's that? Okay. One more question, then we're going to end. We've been an hour, and a lot of people have been talking. We did this site, so everyone's pointing to you, sir. This is like The Price is Right. Oh my gosh, come on down. Are you not hearing me?
Well, I wanted to say before we get into this so deeply, what do we have to do to get you to introduce a bill in Congress calling for moisture in your district?
Oh my gosh. The whole page on my app is the weather forecast. It is.
Okay.
I grew up ranching. It hurts to look at the weather forecast, doesn't it? When we look out 2 weeks and it's nothing. You guys got a blessing down here. You got a little bit of moisture the last few weeks. We didn't get anything up north. And you know, I'm going to elaborate if I could, real quick. I know you have a question. I'm going to get it. That was a joke and a comment. I'm going to just make one comment. Then I'm going to give it back to you. And by the way, the only way we're going to fix that, and we're going to come back to you, sir. The only way we're going to fix that is with God's help. Because 5 things that we do here in southern Utah. The tortoise habitat, critical to the future of this community. The northern corridor, critical to the future of this community. water projects, which we've been deeply involved with. The Virginia River Fish Project, for example, or I'm sorry, what did I say? Virginia. Oh my gosh, I've been back there too long. Yeah, that's funny. Infrastructure and other things, but look, we understand the depth of the deficit in water. We understand the drought, but again, pray that God will be good to us on that, because if you're a farmer rancher like my brothers are now, it's scary. Okay, to your questions.
Okay, the first question, I'd like you to tell us.
You guys are all cheaters. We said one question.
Okay, do you agree that Joe Biden is the legally, lawfully, and honestly elected president of the United States? Yes or no?
Yes. I do.
You do?
I do.
Okay. And here's the second one. This is an evaluation of
Can I elaborate on the first question? Sure. Okay, and then we'll get to your second one.
Yeah, just answer. Do a politician answer.
Don't do a politician answer. Okay, well, this is worth elaborating. Do some of you know that I voted against certifying one aspect of the electorals in Congress? Yes. And the reason was I looked at Pennsylvania and I said that is clearly unconstitutional what they did. As I said, our Constitution mandates that state legislatures have authority to regulate their elections. Pennsylvania did not do that. They had regulators who went in and changed every rule beyond anything they had the capability to do. That's why I voted against certifying the Pennsylvania elections.
So your answer should have been no. Right.
No, because Pennsylvania itself would not have changed the outcome of the election.
That's just one instance.
Yeah. Look, go ahead.
Okay, this is, I'd like to know your evaluation of this, and it's quick. On February the 13th, Mitch McConnell, Republican Speaker, he gave a speech in the Senate, and he said, Trump's conduct, and I'm quoting, Trump's conduct on January 6th, when a mob of Trump supporters stormed the U.S. Capitol, a disgraceful, dereliction of duty, and went on to say, there's no question, none, that Trump is practically and mostly responsible for providing the events of the day in which 5 people were
I think I get the
5 people dead, the U.S. Capitol officers injured in parts of the building degraded. Do you believe that Mitch McConnell's evaluation and assessment of that situation?
No, I think Mitch McConnell, what he said there was nonsense. I think he's wrong. I think he's wrong on so many different levels. To blame the president for this, the president was very clear. Go down to the Capitol and protest peacefully. It's nonsense to say that he was trying to create an insurrection. It's just simply not true. And the fact that the media says it 8 trillion times does not make it true. They can say it as long as they want. It does not make it true. The second thing is Mitch McConnell said, and he's just wrong on this, he said in which 5 people were killed. That's factually not true. There was one person who was killed, Ashley Babbitt, who was killed by a police officer. There were other people who died over the course of that event, over the course of several days, that had nothing at all to do with the Capitol riot. Nothing at all. The fact that the media says it again and again and again does not make it true. And they can say it as often as they want, and it's still not true. I was there, as you all know. I had a unique position as I was in an office that was right off the porch of the Capitol. I was in a place that had windows. I watched it unfold. For anyone to claim that that was a result of Donald Trump is nonsense. It's just simply not true. I don't know whether to stop or not. We said we'd be 45 minutes to an hour. Gary's giving me the wind-up signal. I'm going to do one more if we could, and again, I apologize to the people who are standing. I know you're tired. Let's go right here if we could. The madam in the back, yes. Last question.
I was curious about the truckers that may be staging a stand-up tomorrow at the 1st of March. How do you feel about that? How
Yeah.
that. And I would really like our freedoms to be preserved and protected, and it doesn't feel like that's happening.
Yeah. So last week, Super Bowl was on, and someone asked me, who are you cheering for? And I said, the Canadian truckers. If there's a trucker rally in D.C., I'm going to be sitting in the cab of one of them. And I pray that this president doesn't take the Justin Trudeau school of fascism. Because the way he treated his Canadian citizens is absurd. For him to call them racist and Nazis and everything else he did, when the evidence was in everyone's face that that was not true. Terrorists, among other things. The only thing worse than a trucker is a parent at a school board meeting, right? The only greater terrorist. And I hope you guys know I'm kidding, right? You get my sarcasm. I don't have my mask on. You can tell I'm kidding. And look, those people were just standing up for what they felt like their basic freedoms. You used the word freedom. They were standing up for just their basic freedoms. And the Prime Minister shut them down like unimaginable. So I'm cheering for the truckers. I hope they go back to D.C. and make some trouble. I hope they make the administration feel uncomfortable. Okay. I really do have to go. Okay, we're going to do one more because you're really anxious. Yes?
You know, because you brought up water, and that's my biggest concern living here is our water situation. And why hasn't the government, I mean, everyone's counting on, the dam in Colorado, which to me it's like it's the lowest it's been in its history. So that's not really an option. Why aren't we looking into desalinization plants and popping it up?
Yeah, so desalinization, that's actually a great question. And are you familiar with the technology of it, desalinization?
Yes, and everyone says it's so expensive, and it's going to get more expensive. But if you don't do anything about it, it's going to be even more
Well, and my response would be it's kind of like energy, all of the above. If desalinization can work, we should do it. I think the very first thing we need to do is build more dams. I mean, why in the world are we wasting the water that we're wasting? Well, and that's another issue. But look, there's several things we can do. And we're all going to pay a price for this. But if you believe desalinization work and it's economically viable, we should. Again, I think dams are the first thing we could do.
Carl's bad, and in California has one for their city, and it works great.
Well, so do some cities in Israel. Hey, listen, I love you.
I gotta fix one thing you said.
Yes.
You said the kids have not been in school for 2 years. Washington County was the bravest county in the land.
And I'm so grateful that you were. Are you associated with the school board or schools?
I'm a teacher, but our school board and our superintendent were brave.
Yeah.
To begin school, they were so brave.
Yeah,
so
they really were. They went completely against the tide on that. And they did it against fierce opposition from people who, by the way, don't live in this community. Not against, yep. And I come from a family of educators, my wife, some of my children, my parents, God bless our teachers, but they need to teach kids in school. Thank you for doing that. All right. I hope you guys know I love you. Thank you so much for being here tonight. God bless our country. Thank you.